Welcome to the Center for Advanced Studies. Welcome to our third Globalization Conference. My task today is to introduce you to the topic that we are discussing, which is the interface between the gender debate and the term and the topic, the ongoings of re-globalization. And in doing so, I would like to address three clusters mainly. First, what is re-globalization and why does it matter? Second, what is the gender debate's historical symptomatology at the moment and the context? We speak of productive ambiguities and challenges. And last but not least, I would like to move forward 7 theses very shortly to address the interface of re-globalization and gender, how it could evolve in the coming years. Now, re-globalization, first of all, as we conceive it, is about a changing environment and a changing perception of globalization as we knew it since the 1990s. It is about new frontiers of political, economic, and social globalization and of a changing phase that globalization is undergoing. And this is an evolving theoretical discourse at the moment. We started it in 2019 in the journal Global E and produced over 30 single pieces that address different issues of how globalization is being reconceived at the moment. There are publications on the issue of religion in the age of re-globalization. There are theoretical discussion of what re-globalization is in different realms of the social sciences, including business and economics. There has been a special issue of the journal Globalizations that has exclusively addressed and theorized what re-globalization can be, and the whole discourse about how globalization is being reshaped by events, but also by the impact of ideology and political polarization, has also been taken up increasingly by politicians, for example, by the Turkish foreign minister, but also by the Director General of the World Trade Organization, Gozio Konyo-Iweala, who just recently said that the best way to address the world's future, including the target supply chains, was re-globalization without specifying exactly what it is. In any case, the whole discourse of re-globalization is taking a grip on the contemporary debate of emerging issues and of timely issues. Now, what is re-globalization? You see here the two gentlemen who are responsible for driving it forward, or at least have a say in it. Xi Jinping, the ruler of China, and Vladimir Putin, the ruler or new Tsar of Russia. And since the 2010s and later, more importantly, since 2019, Ingrid Kofler and I have tried to understand what it is following a key term pronounced and issued by Manfred Steger, which is unsettled times. Globalization is going through a transition phase of its basic paradigms and its basic mechanisms. The international economy is changing. We have a renationalization trend, a deglobalization trend, especially since Brexit and the Trump years. We have a growing social inequality and public dissatisfaction in both open and closed systems. And we have most known balances in flux. Add to this climate change, which has a growing impact, shrinking resources, but also the mobilization of youth movements against the basics of the current global order, at least against important pillars of it. You have a very fragile and floating international environment. To this is added the development of modern avant-garde technologies such as artificial intelligence that drive a human-machine convergence, which is replacing what we conceived as human-machine interaction. Now it goes in the direction of a direct melting of the human mind and the human body with new technological devices, with artificial intelligence. At the same time, we have the rise of social media, of disinformation campaigns, and what is called the techlash of democracy and open societies. Of course, we have already witnessed what authoritarian systems, which according to the Bertelsmann Transformation Index 2022, for the first time since World War II, are the majority on the world, not democracies anymore, can and will do, more importantly, what they intend to do with the programmatic declarations of Vladimir Putin on the eve of the Ukraine war and afterwards. These powers, the new illiberal powers, are gaining in self-conviction, in assertiveness. They plan to duplicate the globalization that was established by the liberal democratic powers of the West. They want to create a different world order, or by modifying the existing one, or by creating their own parallel globalization. So that many current colleagues in the global studies theory believe that the future will not be about one globalization, but about at least two competing globalizations, which are embedded in competing modernities. That means in competing concepts of what globalization and the good life resulting from it could and should be. Overall, we speak of a rising multipolar global order that is not any longer dominated mainly by liberal ideas of the West, but becomes more complex and more competitive. All these aspects taken together, we can say that globalism, including very different ideologies such as neoliberalism, or also the so-called alternative green mindset, is undergoing a variety of ruptures and rifts. And the question is, what is the future of globalization? How will it continue, if at all? And in our view, re-globalization means, in essence, so this phase of transition, to refine, reframe, reform, redefine, and revision what has been conceived and perceived as the status and mechanisms of globalization over the past 30 so-called happy years of globalization. Refining means that we should clarify what we mean with globalization and what exactly is included in it and what not. Reframing means to conceive globalization in a different way, for example, by adapting it to the new power constellations that are exceeding most expectations of the happy years of globalization. Reforming means making efforts towards substantial changes in mechanisms and efficiency in order to renew basic features. This would also include a better adaptation to local context, which means contextualization or glocalization as a buzzword. Redefining means to reconsider very basic definitions of globalization, and revisioning would mean to fundamentally reconsider globalization as such. What of it makes sense, what not? We have seen this in the interruption, for example, of the supply chains in the pandemic. We are seeing it now in the inflation issue and in the energy security issue in the aftermath or during the Ukraine war. So revisioning means to fundamentally reconsider the whole of what globalization is and should be. Now, if this is re-globalization, so the current state of globalization in flux, then the gender question is certainly interwoven in this process. First of all, on the geopolitical dimension, as you know, we are experiencing the most profound crisis of most global bodies and the overarching United Nations systems, according to Secretary General Antonio Guterres, since their foundation, since their launch 75 years ago. This comprises the state of the UN Commission, the status of women, where we have a very complex construct, which makes sure that nations such as Afghanistan or Algeria, others who basically do not practice women's rights, not to speak of the gender debate, have the presidency or are in the commission. And the same is true for the state of the UN Human Rights Council. We have states like Saudi Arabia and others who, or China, who are diametrically opposed to human rights and exclude them from the legal systems, but participate in the international sphere. The same is true for most other issues. So we are undergoing a gender question that is questionable, that must renew its location in the international sphere. The other dimension is the gender question towards the inside, the domestic dimension of open societies. And this is even more a question of social struggles and a new ideological debate. If re-globalization means that we live in a world of ambiguous developments, the gender debate is certainly not an exception. It presents a particularly wide spectrum in our time. It is at least partially involved into the political polarization and the related identity and culture wars in the United States and the Anglosphere, partly also in Europe. Cases abound, and all of them, or most of them, are instrumentalized both by the right in the first place, but partially also by the left. For example, transgender persons still in transition compete in women's sports. Is that right or is it wrong? We have the politicization of gender toilets in the United States. We have the sexual identity education debate in schools with, as just one symbolic case, Florida's Governor DeSantis' law against sexual education until the 3rd grade, which is also a question, is this promoting the gender issue or is it harming it? And last but not least, corporations such as Disney, who want to ban terms like ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls from the language and replace it with friends. All these are ambiguous developments, such as most recently the creation of a disinformation board, or as its critics call it, a truth ministry within US Homeland Security. Question is, where's the line between opinion and disinformation? Of course, it was given to a woman, the liberal activist and expert on women online, Nina Jankovic, because those who provided it to her thought it was a little bit easier to deal with this issue. It was connected with, to some extent, with the gender question. And another example that is very prominent on the current stage, staged symbolically by the so-called present attention economy, is the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial between two celebrities. It is really staged as a gender dichotomy, and it is quite interesting that the male participant or protagonist, Johnny Depp, speaks hours and hours about alcoholism, drug addiction, as completely perfectly normal lifestyle issue that helps him to control his demons, as he said. But that Amber Heard, who is not an alcoholic, who is not a drug addict, is immediately diagnosed with borderline histrionic personality disorder, so that the whole process, the whole trial seems to be decided just by the start, by ascribing what was used in former times, ascribing hysteria, or at least a disease, a non-normal affection to the woman, and the male is perfectly okay with his aberrations. So there are other cases that I cannot all mention. For example, watching porn in the parliament. The whole issue of the porn industry was at least $100 billion, growing at 15% a year in times when we have zero growth, basically, on the world, or at least a very, very low growth. Is it a liberation or usurpation force of gender politics, stereotypes and paradigmata? There is a kind of bigotry of the debate about it. In South Tyrol, here, where Eurac research is located, we had the draft for a new, more progressive gender law rejected most recently. And we can say that all this points to what are increasing politicization of the whole discourse, not to speak of woke culture, cancel culture, and other issues that instrumentalize the whole debate. In any case, what we can say is there are ways to move the debate forward in order to improve the visibility, the rooted presence, and emancipation of the debate. At the interface between academia, global bodies, politics, and civil society, and I think I'm with most of my colleagues saying that this is necessary, that we make the next steps in integrating re-globalization processes with the gender debate. First, I would suggest to insert it into macro strategies of development. For example, the new UNESCO strategy 2022-2029, with its focus on gender and the global south, a very important and relevant interconnection that will be discussed in this conference series. Second, we should include the gender debate into the nascent fields of interdisciplinary anticipation and futures literacy, which are two important new interdisciplinary developments in the social sciences. Futures literacy, being literate, being able to use the future, has to do with being gender conscious. This has to be developed on a common basis in transcultural, trans-civilizational ways. Third, interconnecting the gender debate with developing key terms such as globalization. How has the gender debate to be adapted to very different contexts, which were often treated as the same. Fourth, creating more effective global-local legal interfaces, creating laws that build on progress in given areas, and that must nevertheless respect some basic standards such as gender budgeting, independent evaluation of governmental gender impact, and then gender decision balancing in programming. Fifth, gaining more men for the cause, more male human beings, including celebrities. Why is Leonardo DiCaprio advertising the environment but not gender equality? Sixth, evolving masculinity education as a general educational task in schools and beyond, across basically all stages of the educational curriculum. And seventh, maybe a very important issue for the times of re-globalization and polarization, staying politically balanced and as much as possible inclusive to the raging identity and cultural wars. Although many say this is impossible, the gender issue is by itself progressive and leftist. It would be great if as many conservatives, as many voices that disagree with some features of how the gender issue is implemented today could be included for the sake of reason. Now, to conclude, I would say that first of all, re-globalization and gender debates belong together and are in essence two sides of the same coin. They point towards a global systemic shift that is ongoing and an evolution of patterns. Both have to be better interrelated, both theoretically and practically. And I think that moving them towards each other is for mutual benefit, but means interpreting re-globalization rather as a chance and opportunity instead of a threat. We experience so much threat rhetoric these days by the follow-ups of the Ukraine war, by the effects of the pandemic related to shortages, to inflation, to inequality, and so on. Let us understand re-globalization more as a chance for moving forward the gender debate, and not just as a threat or a regression. And last but not least, in my view, one largely open question is how gender and re-globalization, which in my view are two guiding terms for the coming years in basically all fields of social action and theoretization, can be connected with the other two contemporary guiding terms, resilience and sustainability. There has been some work to relate gender better to sustainability, but the resilience debate is still widely open. And so is the question how re-globalization and resilience could be interconnected. So this is my very short impression of what is going on at the moment, just as a basis of the budget for your certainly much more elaborated and in-depth discussion. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Roland, for your presentation. I think you've brought quite a lot of food for thought for all of us today. And also you've already touched upon many issues that I think also our panelists today will be coming back upon, from your 7 theses to then also the ideas of how to include men and differing concepts also of masculinities in this discussion, and also how to present and portray the discussion about gender and gender inequalities on a global level. So you've talked about the issue of fighting gender inequality globally, and also then the ambiguity of the concept and the possibilities that perhaps even our societies in the global north, where we'd like to think we have achieved quite some progress in gender equality, have not come as far as we might hope. And I think something that also emerged quite clearly here was in your presentation was the overlapping of different issues, of different global challenges that have strong connections to gender. And this, I think, leads me over to our panelists who are also working on this issue, connected to other global challenges, and who will surely be able to inform our discussion today about how gender and re-globalization can be better connected, and what they can do to inform each other and the discourses in the respective fields in the future.